Hi, my name is Whitney Owens, and I'm one of the counselors over at Water's Edge Counseling. Today I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, also known as OCD. At any given time, 2.2 million Americans have Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. That's about 1% of our population. So to tell you more about what OCD is, it's exactly as the title says, obsessions and compulsions. An obsession is a thought that goes in our head over and over again. Sometimes it can be a pattern of thought. For some, they describe it as a very intrusive thought that they can't get out of their head and it just comes in at any given moment. It seems like it's not triggered by anything. And the only way that these people can find to get rid of those obsessions is to do compulsions. So those are behaviors that get rid of that obsession. Some classical examples that we find is someone who feels that germs are in their home, so maybe they wipe their counters down 7 times with a wipe to make sure to get rid of those germs. Or maybe they check doorknobs. They want to make sure the knobs are locked and they check them 3 times at night before bed. Usually there's some type of ritual that relieves some kind of anxiety. With COVID happening, of course, we're finding more cases of OCD because anxiety is spiking and people are more concerned about germs. It was interesting that lots of clients, right when this started back in March of 2020, people were finding that their OCD wasn't as prevalent as it had been because there were other people actually engaging in some obsessions and compulsions as well as they were concerned about germs. They didn't feel so much pressure on themselves to be the one thinking about all this for our nation, kind of a collective consciousness idea. But now that this is continuing, we're finding more and more people are becoming obsessed about germs and cleanliness, which is all in good health, right? But then there's times that it becomes too much and it becomes consuming for people. As far as the diagnosis and age, we're finding that within that 1% population that has OCD, it equally impacts men and women. And most people that have OCD have symptoms by the time they're 19. But 25% of people who end up getting that diagnosis have symptoms before the age of 14. All that to say is this is a difficult time in our nation for teenagers and children. And we are going to find that OCD is more prevalent than it has ever been before with them. So now that we've kind of addressed who is having it and what OCD actually is, let's talk about the most important part, which is what do we do to get better when we have OCD? The number one step, as is with most disorders and concerns in our lives, is to acknowledge it. Excuse me. Most of us do not want to acknowledge that we have OCD. It's not a pleasant thing to say. It's a terrible thing to experience because it is so invasive in our lives. But the only way that you can make steps to start getting better is to acknowledge that it's happening to you and to actually start getting help for that, right? So the first thing I want you to do is acknowledge that you might have OCD or OCD tendencies. Maybe you don't meet the full criteria of a diagnosis, but you find that you have a little bit of obsession compulsions, or maybe people in your family say that to you. Hey, you're acting kind of obsessed about this idea, or maybe you're doing too much cleaning in that or checking on that. That's a way to start noticing that that's happening. So the next thing I want you to do is start to pay attention to your triggers. What are the common thoughts that you have? What are those obsessions? And identify what are the compulsions that you're having to do. You may want to even write this down in a journal, talk to a friend or a parent or a loved one about it. But I want you to acknowledge what your triggers are that may be leading you to have obsessions and compulsions. So it might be concern for your safety, might be concern or safety of a loved one. It might be another perfectionistic tendency that you have, or maybe just the thought of if I don't do this act or this thing perfectly, maybe the way you arrange your pillows on the sofa or the way that you handwrite something, then if it's not done perfectly, that means X, Y, and Z bad will happen. Well, that's not the case, right? And so then you become obsessed with the idea that I have to do something a certain way or this is a certain outcome, and that's just not the case. So being able to pay attention, what are the things that triggered you to start to have those thoughts? Then I want you to do the opposite of your anxiety. I know that can sound kind of different, but it's super, super helpful, and this is why. When we do the very thing that our OCD tells us to do, we actually almost feed it. It's kind of like a monster inside of a closet trying to make its way out, and every time we give in to our OCD, we're opening the door, or we're giving it a little more food, making it stronger until it can really come out and get us. And so by doing the opposite of that, you actually make your obsession smaller. You make the anxiety weaker instead of stronger by doing the opposite. So let's say I have an obsession with checking doors at night. I find this to be very common for people who are worried about safety ultimately. And so if I feel the need to get up and check the door, but I know that I've already checked the door, I know that the door is locked, and I know that I am safe, but I'm just a little worried, right? Just a little. I got to go check again. I just got to make sure, right? We all kind of have those thoughts at times, but someone who has OCD is doing it consistently every single night. So instead of getting up again, when you already know you've checked the door, choose not to check the door. That is how you give it less strength in your life. And for every night that you go and you check that door 4 different times, you're saying that that's what you need to give yourself calmness. So instead of doing that, find other things that bring you relief. Some people find that through meditation, some people through prayer. Maybe it's through writing in your journal, maybe it's through talking with someone, but you need to find that strength within yourself. Maybe you drink a cup of tea at night, or you read a book to relax you so that you don't have to get up and you don't have to check that door. We also often use cognitive behavioral therapy to help with this, and understanding that this is not often that someone would break into the house. It hasn't happened in a long time, or it hasn't happened in the past year. It's very likely not going to happen again, so we use that as well. But I want you to do the opposite of what your anxiety is telling you to do. And don't seek reassurance from other people. It's the same concept that when we go to other people for our reassurance, it's also feeding that anxiety. It's making us think about it over and over and over. So you want to acknowledge that you feel anxious or have a thought, but don't engage with it. Move past it, accept it, and move on, and don't go and engage with it. OCD is a real serious illness. I treat it often in therapy, and I want to encourage you that if you are listening to this and you're thinking, maybe I do have OCD or I'm not certain, please don't let it continue to rule your life. People who have OCD feel like their anxiety rules their life every single day, and I can promise you it doesn't have to. I've seen people get better through therapy. There's different types of therapy that counselors do. That could be cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. We do family of origin issues, all those types of things that we can work on in therapy, and so many of them have been effective in working with people with OCD. So if you or a loved one or a friend of yours you think might have OCD, talk to them about that and talk about getting help. It's amazing how quickly, within just 6 to 8 sessions, anxiety can get much better by learning from some very simple tactics on dealing with anxiety and dealing with OCD. So please don't wait. You can give us a call. We're at Water's Edge Counseling, and all that will be available to you at watersedgecounseling.com. And thank you for taking the time to listen.